Hello, my name is Jeremy, and this is the True Crime Chronicles channel. There's nothing more perilous than an individual solely focused on amassing wealth regardless of the consequences. Such a person grows apathetic not just to the suffering of others, but may also infringe upon the most hallowed aspect: life. Onkar Verma, a journalist based in New Zealand, had a 25-year-old sister named Wensi living in London with Amarjit Chohan and their two young kids. Eagerly anticipating a reunion after a lengthy period of separation, Onkar was looking forward to his visit to his family, a visit that was to happen for the first time in nearly a decade. The excitement was palpable, as he and Wensi hadn't seen each other in 9 years, making this feel like a long-awaited family gathering. Onkar would regularly engage in lengthy conversations with both his sister and their mother, who resided with Wensi and assisted with the childcare. They excitedly planned activities for Onkar's visit, discussing places to see and ways to enjoy their time together. Yet, on February 15, 2003, these daily communications came to an abrupt halt. When Verma attempted to reach Wensi or their mother, there was no response. Initially, he assumed the Chohan family might be on a trip, but as time passed, doubt crept in, especially given that they hadn't mentioned any travel plans, particularly with his visit just around the corner in 5 days. Concerned for his family's well-being, Onkar contacted the Metropolitan Police for help. A police unit sent to the Chohan residence in West London found it deserted. Neighbors and work associates speculated that the entire family had returned to their native India. Further information from Scotland Yard only escalated Onkar's worries for his sister, mother, and nephews, transforming concern into outright fear. He resolved to travel to the UK himself to delve into the mystery of his family's vanishing. Upon his arrival in London, Verma found himself isolated in a foreign land he had never before visited. He made his way to the Chohan household in Hounslow, only to be greeted by a scene that left him in utter disbelief. At a cursory glance, the interior appeared normal, as if its inhabitants had merely stepped out briefly and would return momentarily. However, the reality was starkly different. The family had been absent for weeks. Laundry remained in the washer. Children's toys and baby bottles with remnants of food were strewn across the floor and on the kitchen counter. Food residues had spoiled. It looked as though someone had been interrupted while doing the dishes. Clothing and suitcases were neatly stored away, yet some personal belongings were haphazardly dispersed throughout the 3-bedroom home. Food was still in the refrigerator. Yet, the discovery that plunged Onkar into despair was finding his mother's cherished prayer book within the home, a possession she always kept close and never left behind. The lack of any sign of a struggle suggested a sudden and hurried departure. Verma was baffled by the sudden disappearance of his sister's family, including 2 young children. With convincing proof that his relatives had not left their home voluntarily, Onkar persuaded the authorities to initiate an inquiry. Subsequently, the investigation into the missing family was intensified, with a team of detectives from the Serious Crime Division taking charge. Verma had lost all hope of reuniting with his family and seeing their shared dreams come to fruition. The family at the center of this mystery included the accomplished 46-year-old businessman, Amarjit Chohan, his spouse Nancy, her mother 51-year-old Charanjit Kaur, their 1.5-year-old son Devinder, and his 3-month-old brother Ravinder. Amarjit, through his loving marriage with Nancy, had achieved an enviable life. Yet, in February, the entire family, spanning 3 generations, mysteriously disappeared without leaving behind any clues. This narrative unfolds around the individual responsible for their disappearance, highlighting a story of immense treachery by a heartless criminal driven by greed. This criminal nearly succeeded in eluding law enforcement, and those closest to him by orchestrating a crime so distinctive and horrifying that its feasibility was beyond anyone's imagination. In 2003, Amarjit Anil Chohan was at the helm of Chiba Freight, a flourishing fruit import business located near Heathrow. His staff revered him as a contented family man and a benevolent employer. Blessed with a devoted wife and 2 young children, Anil saw his workforce as an extension of his own family. During peak business periods, he would often treat his team to pizza and beverages, managing the enterprise with a relaxed demeanor that earned him immense respect from his employees. They were unable to fathom the future of the company should Chohan decide to relocate to India. The idea of returning to his native land was a recurring theme in discussions with his wife, Nancy, who harbored hopes that Amarjit, at 46, would soon retire, allowing them more time to devote to their children. Given his diligent work ethic and substantial earnings, this dream was within reach. Nancy longed to return to India, frequently expressing this wish to her husband, and over time, Anil warmed up to the notion of eventually selling the business to move back to his roots, to the familiar landscapes of his youth and his loved ones. This plan might have come to fruition had it not been for the fact that owning Chiba Freight placed Amarjit Chohan in the crosshairs of someone with designs on the thriving company, someone who aimed to seize control of it without spending a dime. In January 2003, Kenneth Regan, freshly released from prison, sought employment at Chiba Freight. Amarjit Chohan, who had also faced legal challenges due to tax evasion, empathized with Regan's plight and his professed ambition to make a fresh start. Known among his staff for his leniency and willingness to offer multiple chances, Amarjit understood the difficulty of securing employment post-incarceration. Having rebuilt his own life, he felt inclined to extend the same opportunity to Kenneth, thus hiring him as a driver. Regan proved to be hard-working, unafraid of menial tasks, and performed his duties commendably. However, Regan was no ordinary delivery driver. 5 years earlier, he had been an adept smuggler, known among his associates as Captain Cash. By the late 1990s, Ken Regan had established himself as a seasoned criminal, having set up various freight companies around Heathrow that doubled as fronts for smuggling illegal drugs into the UK. Amidst his criminal undertakings, Captain Cash enjoyed a lavish lifestyle, rubbing shoulders with notable figures in London's underworld and entire criminal dynasties. Despite his modest demeanor, Regan fancied himself a wealthy bon vivant and a globally recognized figure in the criminal underworld. It was in a chic London bar where he first encountered socialite Belinda Bruin. In 1997, at the height of his illicit activities, he flaunted his wealth, driving a Mercedes and lavishing Bruin with costly presents. She later depicted him as sophisticated, charming, albeit a bit coarse, a man who dressed impeccably, flaunted luxurious watches, and wasn't shy about displaying his affluence, sometimes seen with a briefcase full of cash. Regan believed this lifestyle would elevate his social standing, despite essentially possessing nothing and leading a reckless life. Belinda Bruin found herself ensnared in Regan's world of crime and illusion, much against her will. Regan, consumed by his infatuation with Bruin, bombarded her with calls and emails, expressing his ardor as if he were a lovesick teenager, proclaiming her his obsession and desperately seeking her affection. Despite their superficial acquaintance, Kenneth audaciously referred to her as his girlfriend to his acquaintances, leaving Belinda bewildered, unaware of his identity. Shortly after, Regan faced arrest. On June 17, 1998, Kenneth Regan was apprehended with 25 kilograms of a white substance, facing up to 18 years in prison. Opting to cooperate with the prosecution, his testimony led to the conviction of 12 significant criminals, substantially reducing his own sentence. Released 4 years later, Captain Cash found himself devoid of almost everything, no friends, no money, and his assets confiscated. He resettled in a modest bungalow with his father, pondering ways to reclaim his wealth and status. Considering a return to the illicit drug trade, Regan saw Amarjit Chohan's Chiba Freight as the ideal platform for his comeback. He meticulously crafted a scheme to usurp the company, executing it with such stealth that its fruition went unnoticed. Upon joining Chiba, Regan discovered through colleagues that Chohan was contemplating selling the business to relocate overseas. Seizing this opportunity, he approached Chohan with a fabricated story of having investors ready to purchase the freight company, dangling a $4 million offer to pique Amarjit's interest. As Chohan deliberated over this lucrative proposal, Regan advanced his plan. However, Regan's ambitions extended beyond Chiba Freight. Belinda Bruin, having relocated to Devon to escape Regan's relentless pursuit during his incarceration, found herself once again the object of his attention. Shortly after his release, Regan resumed his attempts to contact her, this time proposing her involvement in a business venture. Aware of her financial predicaments, including a large house, a mortgage, and the tuition for her children's private schooling, especially after her last partner had abandoned her to face these challenges alone, Regan's timing was impeccable. When Belinda reached out to him in response, Regan outlined his strategy to assume control of Chiba Freight, suggesting her as a prospective director despite her inexperience, with a tempting offer of a $54,000 salary for just 2 days of work per week, equivalent to $68,000. Aiming to leverage her situation, Belinda negotiated for $72,000 salary, roughly $90,000, a sum to which Reagan readily acquiesced. The job proposition provided Reagan with a pretext to visit Belinda at her remote Devon residence. He fabricated various excuses, claiming she needed to sign a document or assist with paperwork, for which he was willing to make the journey from London. However, Reagan's true interest lay in the land surrounding Belinda's property, an obsession that soon became apparent. He voiced complaints to the property owner about the condition of the alley and the road leading to the house, expressing a desire to remove some trees, construct an elegant wall complete with electric gates, and install a drainage ditch. His intentions seemed to be driven by a desire to enhance the property's appeal for Belinda, or so it appeared to her. By February, Amarjit Chohan had reached a pivotal decision regarding the future of his company. He arranged to meet with the purported buyers to negotiate the sale. On the morning of the Thursday just before Valentine's Day, he departed from his office, informing his staff of an appointment at Stonehenge. Amarjit also indicated his intention to conclude the sale and promised to personally update them on the matter. This was the final occasion his employees saw him, marking the beginning of a mysterious and alarming disappearance. On a Monday morning, the staff of Chiba Freight were taken aback by an unexpected declaration during a gathering. Kenneth introduced Belinda as the new proprietor of the company, stunning everyone and sparking numerous queries. The employees wondered about Amarjit's whereabouts, why he hadn't bid them farewell, and what their future held. Reagan produced a letter claiming that Amarjit Anil Chohan had decided to sell the company due to deteriorating health and planned to move abroad with his family, Nancy, and their children. The signature on the letter was recognized as Amarjit's by the staff. Owing to the business's thriving nature and the heavy influx of orders, the team had little time to dwell on these developments. They ceased their complaints and discussions about what lay ahead, focusing instead on their work. Belinda was assigned a desk and computer in the office and began to familiarize herself with the company's financials, as per Reagan's instruction. Yet, by her second day, Belinda felt ill and decided to leave for Devon without waiting for Kenneth. Upon reaching her home, she noticed an old, dilapidated Jaguar parked by the road and spotted two men, William Hornsey and Peter Reese, allies of Ken Reagan, excavating a drainage ditch on her property, which greatly upset her. Belinda confronted Reagan upon his arrival at her property, airing her frustrations and rebuking him for the unauthorized excavation. She expressed no need for a drainage ditch, to which Kenneth responded that he had intended it as a surprise and assured her everything would be sorted by summer. However, these plans were derailed when the Metropolitan Police launched a fresh investigation into the entire situation. In 2003, Kenneth Reagan, previously convicted for trafficking illicit drugs, was on the cusp of reclaiming a life of affluence. With Amarjit Chohan, the former proprietor of Siba, now vanished, Reagan had taken charge of his own customs depot, an ideal disguise for smuggling and illegal narcotics. For half a decade, Kenneth had harbored a distant admiration for the high society figure Belinda Bruin, and now she was enlisted in his operations. It appeared as though all his aspirations were realized, leaving nothing but to relish in life's pleasures. Yet, the foundation of Reagan's empire was on the brink of exposure. Onkar Verma's worry and dread for his kin drove him to alert the authorities, urging them to launch a comprehensive probe. The lead detective resolved to interrogate the individual last seen with Amarjit Chohan, the vanished family patriarch, on the day he went missing. This individual was Kenneth Reagan, a former prisoner whose conduct was suspicious from their initial meeting. He attempted to persuade the police that Mr. Chohan was an untrustworthy entrepreneur who had encountered financial woes and had vanished of his own volition. He was eager to offload his business and was probably in a different country by this point. Nevertheless, the investigators were not swayed by Kenneth's narrative. Utilizing advanced forensic methods, they traced the movements of Reagan and Chohan's cell phones on the day he vanished. Initially, Amarjit Chohan's phone was pinpointed at his residence in Hounslow, then followed to Stonehenge, where a business rendezvous was planned. At this location, Reagan's phone made contact with the businessman's phone, after which both proceeded towards Devon. The detective's sole clue was that Belinda Bruin, the new head of Siba, resided in Devon, prompting a decision to visit her. Upon hearing the police's plans to inspect Belinda's premises, Reagan was enraged and tried to dissuade her from permitting any searches on her property, proposing they convene elsewhere. Belinda remained unmoved by Kenneth's advice. Subsequently, Reagan's aide, William Hornsey, contacted the chief detective, claiming he had recently communicated with Amarjit Chohan and that the missing entrepreneur was still in Britain. The officials agreed to a meeting in Newport, Wales, close to the passport agency. Seizing this chance to unravel the mystery of the disappearance, the authorities called off their visit to Belinda's residence. If Amarjit Chohan was indeed safe, they could conclude the investigation. The only step left was confirmation in person. The rendezvous at the passport agency was arranged for Monday, but to Belinda's surprise, Reagan, Hornsey, and Reese paid her a visit over the weekend. The trio observed a trail near the stable that was in disrepair and decided to mend it with gravel. Hence, when the digger was delivered, Belinda wasn't taken aback. She simply took her children to the city, leaving the men free to work on her estate. 2 days afterward, detectives arrived at the intended site for the meeting with Chohan, only to witness Hornsey and Reagan's vehicle show up, linger briefly, and then act as though a call had been received to abort the meeting, leading to its cancellation. The authorities traced the calls, yet the phone was not registered under any name, sending them on a futile quest in their pursuit of the Chohan family. As Reagan resumed his duties at Seba, the detectives reverted to their initial strategy and summoned Belinda Bruin for questioning. Prior to this, Kenneth had vehemently advised her against disclosing the work he had orchestrated on her land to the police. Nonetheless, Belinda found his request peculiar and immediately relayed Reagan's suggestion to the investigators. She revealed that his associates had encroached upon her farm uninvited and excavated a drainage trench, despite her not having requested such work. Belinda was unaware of the significant aid she had just rendered to the police, convinced a grim revelation was imminent at the drainage trench's location. The detectives hastened to Devon. They undertook excavations, conducting thorough forensic analyses with the assistance of skilled forensic archaeologists and pathologists. Over the following 5 days, the Serious Crime Investigation Unit sifted through heaps of soil on Belinda Bruin's property, anticipating the discovery of Amarjit Chohan and his family's remains, yet none were found. By April 2003, after more than 2 months of searching for the absent family members, the police realized they had been searching in the incorrect location. In Bournemouth, Dorset, a favored holiday destination along the English Channel for the British, Dave and Carl Chapon, a father and son duo, had planned a canoe outing for the evening. The sea was serene, the breeze was crisp, and the climate was perfect for extended strolls. Eventually, they spotted something large floating afar. Drawing closer, they discovered it was a human corpse, heavily swollen from prolonged water exposure, rendering it initially difficult to discern its gender. The father remained with the corpse, while the son hurried back to land to alert the rescue services. The man found himself waiting in the darkness on the canoe for nearly 3 hours, unwilling to abandon the deceased. This evening would be etched in their memories forever. The morbid find was eventually transported to the morgue in Bournemouth, but identification of the body took nearly a week. It was the lost entrepreneur Amarjit Anil Chohan, who had endured a blunt force trauma to the head, and his mouth was taped shut. The post-mortem indicated the probable cause of death was the head injury followed by suffocation. The victim's attire was removed for forensic analysis, and 62 miles away, the police continued their probe in Belinda Bruin's field. Their diligence was rewarded. At the dig site, law enforcement uncovered crucial evidence: charred garments, Nancy's jewelry, strands of hair, and bits of children's clothes. The hair was later confirmed to be Mr. Chohan's. These discoveries hinted that they had found the burial site for a family of 5. The once secluded property in Devon, owned by Belinda, was utilized as a clandestine burial ground for the Chohan family. Later, as police grew suspicious, the corpses were unearthed and transported by boat to the center of the bay in Bournemouth, where they were disposed of in the sea. Until the discovery of the body, Seba's staff clung to the hope that their employer would someday return. Even if he had indeed sold the business, he would have at least come to bid farewell or perhaps make a visit after some time. However, all hopes shattered like a fragile bubble when the drowned man was confirmed as Anil Chohan. The situation worsened as concern for the remaining family members grew. Nancy was merely 25 years old, and their children were just infants. The thought that someone could extinguish so many innocent lives was harrowing, yet all evidence pointed tragically in that direction. The excavation area was disproportionately large for the concealment of just one corpse. A smaller site would suffice for hiding a single individual. Furthermore, the simultaneous disappearance of the family patriarch along with his wife, mother-in-law, and children strongly suggested a shared tragic end. Such an act was beyond the comprehension of any ordinary individual. Consequently, the probe escalated, transitioning into a top-tier investigation into particularly heinous crimes. Kenneth Reagan emerged as the prime suspect, yet both he and his accomplice Hornsey were nowhere to be found. Initial leads indicated that Reagan and Hornsey had escaped to Europe, leaving their associate Peter Rees behind. Peter Rees, age 39, and seemingly overwhelmed by remorse for the crime, inexplicably confessed the circumstances surrounding the missing family's end to a complete stranger he met. He was haunted by the fear that he might bear the entire blame. The idea that Reagan could have directed a weapon at 2 young children was beyond his understanding. This confession inevitably reached the authorities, and Peter Rees was apprehended within 12 days. Despite revealing the crime to a passerby, he remained silent during police interrogations, and the fate of the Chohan family continued to elude discovery. 3 weeks subsequent to this, anglers found another corpse in the Solent, a stretch of the English Channel to the north. Onkar Verma was summoned for the identification, and despite the advanced decomposition, he identified the remains as those of his younger sister, Nancy. Kenneth Reagan was apprehended in Belgium after eluding capture for 2 months, and William Hornsey turned himself in to authorities 6 weeks later. With all 3 primary suspects detained, they nonetheless refused to aid the investigation. With 3 members of the Chohan family still unaccounted for and no eyewitnesses to their murders, the investigation required incontrovertible evidence. Unbeknownst to the detectives, Amarjit Chohan himself had left behind a vital piece of evidence. In April 2005, the commencement of the longest criminal trial in the history of British law took place. The prosecution endeavored to demonstrate that Kenneth Reagan, William Hornsey, and Peter Rees were responsible for the kidnapping and murder of the entire Chohan family. Throughout the trial, which lasted 10 months, over 4,500 items of physical evidence were examined. Yet, it was the analysis of phone communications that constituted the cornerstone of the prosecution's case. Amarjit Chohan had initially met with Reagan under the pretense of negotiating the sale of the Chiba Freight Company, but was subsequently abducted and confined at Kenneth's residence. There, he was coerced into signing documents to create the illusion for Chiba employees that he had sold the business and relocated abroad. This crucial piece of evidence emerged from a relative of one of the accused, the son of William Hornsey, who delivered to the police a gray suitcase filled with A4 sheets bearing Mr. Chohan's signatures. Although Reagan's initial scheme involved only eliminating Amarjit, he concluded that Nancy would inevitably sound the alarm, prompting him to decide to exterminate the entire family. Text messages revealed that Peter Rees was tasked with monitoring Chohan, while Reagan and Hornsey proceeded to the family's London residence, where they lingered for several hours. The precise circumstances of how the remaining family members were murdered remain speculative. Amarjit's murder took place in Regan's bungalow, followed by a thorough renovation and the replacement of all furnishings, obliterating any potential evidence. However, a breakthrough came 8 months later when experts discovered a clue inadvertently left by Amarjit Chohan himself. Although his clothing was promptly analyzed, the socks, deemed irrelevant, were overlooked until a forensic scientist noticed an item concealed within the right sock. A folded letter from a building society addressed to Mr. Reagan, dated February 12, 2003, was discovered, proving that on the day he vanished, Amarjit Chohan was indeed in Reagan's residence. This last-ditch effort by Chohan to leave behind a clue, presumably in anticipation of his looming demise, ultimately served as a pivotal piece of evidence for the police. Following a lengthy 9-month trial, the jury rendered a unanimous decision. Peter Rees was condemned to 23 years behind bars for the murder of Amarjit Emil Chohan. Hornsey and Reagan were each handed down 5 consecutive life terms for the slayings of the other members of the Chohan family, ensuring their permanent confinement. The remains of Charanjit Kaur, Amarjit Chohan's mother-in-law, were subsequently discovered off the Isle of Wight's coast. Yet the remains of the 2 young children, Devender, aged 1.5, and 2-month-old Ravender, were never recovered. The perpetration of such deeds against children is indicative of profound psychological aberration, typically in individuals unaware of the gravity of their actions. However, Kenneth Reagan was found to be of sound mind. For him, these heinous acts were mere means to an end, as trivial as changing his attire. Consumed by greed and ambition, the loss of innocent lives was a price he was willing to pay without hesitation. Onkar Verma retreated to New Zealand, forever deprived of the opportunity to reunite with his nephews. His sole memory of them remained captured in a family video recorded merely 2 days prior to their vanishing, discovered in the deserted family home. This video stands as the last vestige of a once joyful and thriving family, a poignant reminder of what was lost. If you liked this story, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss new videos. Don't forget to like and share your opinion in the comments. This is Jeremy. See you in the next video.